Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to support this bill with very few remarks, which I hope that the sponsors of this bill will take into consideration. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have a problem with all these authorities which are being established, and they are all based in the national government. Mr. Speaker, sir, I've looked at the composition of the people who will, when you look at, first of all, on the function of the authority, there's one that says advise national and county governments on disaster risk management measures. But when you go to its headquarters and where it is based, when you look at 4.2, it says the authority may establish other offices it consider necessary for the discharge of its function. Mr. Speaker, sir, we are in this Senate to defend devolution and to ensure that we are fully devolved. Mr. Speaker, sir, I want to recommend that the sponsors of this bill should change that may to shall, and actually state it clearly that they shall establish offices in 47 counties. Because how are you going to advise county governments, yet you are based here in Nairobi, and you may or may not establish offices? So, Mr. Speaker, sir, that is an oversight. And the drafters must really consider changing that to ensure that we fully support devolution. Mr. Speaker, sir, on the other issue of these authorities, we are fighting the issue of corruption in this country. When you give an authority the power to borrow and lend money, that to me is suspect. And it can be abused. I would like to recommend to the sponsors of this bill to do away with that lending. You know, they can borrow money, they can write grants, but they should not be an institution that has powers to lend. Leave that to the banks, or leave that to financial institutions where everyone else can go to get money. Mr. Speaker, sir, when you go to the issue of the board, it is my hope that the sponsors of this bill will consider that even though the chairperson is appointed by the cabinet secretary, from among the members appointed under paragraph F, which is all these other entities, they should, the cabinet secretary who is given that power should actually be required to consult 47 disaster management experts representing each and every county, and then finally appoint somebody from a disaster-prone area. We are blessed in this country of Kenya where we have areas where they don't know anything to do with disaster. They never have to worry. But where I come from, because of the encroachment of Mau Forest, Senator Mogeni clearly stated, Narok town floods all the time. I would hope that when this chairperson is being appointed, or even the people to serve in that board, the people who should be considered to be in that board are people who come from those disaster-prone areas, because it is in their interest to ensure that the decision they make impact positively their people, help their people. It is sad that in this country, we tend to approach things from a knee-jerk reaction after the event. Right now, all our roads are destroyed. I remember during the coalition government, there was a disaster management team. I know also the president set up a disaster management body. But this disaster management, they were completely out of touch with the reality. When we are fighting right now on the issue of Solai, if this authority was there, Mr. Speaker, sir, then we would not be getting conflicting statements. The Red Cross has done its work. Now we in the Senate are doing our job, but at least it would have been easier for us to be able to go to this authority that has a representation in Nakuru County for them to be able to give us information so that we know how to be able to support our people. Mr. Speaker, sir, I have an issue, and I've seen it in all these bills which talks about establishing an authority. There's a clause, and I think it's from a template. Everyone who is drafting the bill always go to that template and just grab it and paste it in their bill. 2 persons, 1 man and woman nominated by the Council of Governors. Even in the previous bill, I had raised issues. Because why are we giving so much power to the Council of Governors? Yet you know that this is a problem that affects not 2 individuals, but almost 47 counties. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I would like to request the sponsors of this bill to do away with that. In each of our counties, we do have a department that deals with disaster. We do have a department that deals with environment issues. I think if we do not have a department specifically or a CEC who deals with matters disaster in some other counties, anything that comes close to that disaster, a drought is a disaster, maybe the CEC in charge of agriculture should be requested to be part of that authority. So I think in this Senate, we really have to fight for devolution. Every bill that we debate here, every bill should be to advance devolution. I tend to think that some of these bills really claw back on devolution. That's my opinion, of course. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, but the spirit of the bill is amazing. It is something which will be able to help us. I'm sure if this authority was in place, moving people out of Mao Forest would not have waited until now, when people are dying, when our rivers are drying. This authority would have made it very clear that there is a problem and there is a disaster waiting to happen. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, when we talk about the Director General, I also have an issue. There are people here in this country who are experts. You don't necessarily, when you'll find in some companies, some CEOs don't necessarily have a degree that come from the practice. So I think we should open and allow more Kenyans to be able to apply. They are vetted, interviewed, because sometimes, because of either certain regulations or certain red tape, someone who is very intelligent, who would have become an engineer, ended up becoming a teacher. But he thinks engineer, he eats engineer, he talks engineer. So we should really open up and give people who probably did not have an opportunity before to pursue a certain career to be given an opportunity to help solve the disaster. I would have hoped that we can be able to increase people in the fire department. Mr. Speaker, sir, recently in this county of Nairobi, we've experienced several fires in the markets, Gikomba Market. Currently, in the entire Republic of Kenya, students are afraid of the outside world, so they are resorting into burning schools. So I think that is a disaster. So let us put people who are experts in the fire department. The Red Cross does a good job. But I think once this body has been established and it has been put and it is represented in all 47 counties, the Red Cross will come in as just another added benefit, added support. Let us give our institutions an opportunity to be able to do their work. When we were seated in this house, I got an opportunity to see a breaking news that all 12 football players and their coach were rescued because the entire disaster, or rather the operation, the rescue, was carried out by the Navy. I think it is important also to include our military. Mr. Speaker, sir, when you travel to Egypt, Egypt has the largest military in Africa and possibly around the world. Most of the work carried out in that country is carried out by the military. Our military is also equipped here in this country with a lot of expertise, with a lot of resources. Let us utilize them. There's no point of putting them just there, waiting, and we are very happy, and we thank God that we've never had a fight, a major, apart from the rescue missions in Somali, or rather the peace missions in Somali. There's no point of us keeping these military personnel there, and yet we have this disaster. During the Solai tragedy, what I read from the cabinet secretary in charge of defense, she said that when they were called, they went there. But then when we tried to get more information, it was limited to what we could be given. They took pictures. It is important that everything which happens there, it is fully coordinated, on that information is disseminated, is given to this authority. So, Mr. Speaker, sir, I think the composition of the board really has got to include all these experts, people from the military, people from the agricultural sector, people who can be able to come up with mitigations, strategies that will be able to help us. When our cows die, and every so often, Mr. Speaker, sir, like last year, when you went across Narok County and Kajiado County, the county were littered with carcasses of dead animals. That is a disaster. Someone who comes either from that community or who cares about the future of that community in terms of their basic economic, support base, to be able to encourage them to seek other alternatives. So this body, Madam Speaker, I would really persuade the sponsors to expand it further so that it can be able to support the entire country. Madam Speaker, coming to the issue of the disaster management plan, it is imperative that when this authority is coming up with a plan, a disaster management plan, that plan goes down to the grassroots. We know very well that in Rift Valley, we have several fault lines. We know very well that in some parts of central Kenya, and even part of Rift Valley, there are mudslides. So in each of those plans, specific plans should be developed that targeted or rather which will be able to solve problems. Because if you come and tell me we have a major plan for the whole country, yet we have Maasai people, cows dying there, and there's no plan to help them, and then we approach it from a knee-jerk reaction, it will not help us. So, Madam Speaker, it is important that as we move forward, and as I conclude, on the issue of the classification of disasters, I'm happy that this bill has looked at the different classes of disaster and classified them in a way that it will be able to help them come up with better policy to be able to mitigate. Madam Speaker, with those few remarks, I support with amendments